Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at parental narcissism in the form of air signs. The air signs are Gemini, Libra, Aquarius. I have already done videos on narcissism. I first started out by dividing them into the elements, and then I realized that there are nuances within each sign. So I then did further videos on each sign. If I think, I will link it below, but in any case, that's what this is about. And I'm looking at the dynamic between parent and child meaning, minor child, but it could also relate to adult children because certainly it's not like you become 18 and your parents magically change if you have like a dysfunctional relationship. It's going to, perpetuate itself until either party or both parties decides that they're going to change. If you change yourself, the dynamic or the relationship can't help but change. That's just how it works. So if you are experiencing this, if you're listening because you have a parent who is one of those signs, then understand that you can definitely affect this dynamic. And I do acknowledge that sometimes it's so bad that you can't really have much of a relationship with this type of person, especially a malignant narcissist, because a lot of times they do not see themselves as a problem. And this is where a semi-disclaimer comes in. I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not trying to play psychologist. I like the subject of psychology, and I have my own definition of narcissism that is not the textbook definition, probably, I'm assuming. My definition of malignant narcissism, because there are two main types, as I have, been told or assumed or have learned, that there is malignant narcissism and covert narcissism. Covert narcs are narcs, that's short for narcissists, who are always having problems, and they try to maintain the center of attention by being helpless, by needing assistance from other people all the time. And I think we all have encountered people like that in our life. And they have their own set of issues for sure, because they can be very draining on others. But the type that we typically associate with narcissism in that kind of villain way is the malignant narcissist. And remember that narcissism is on a spectrum. So you might have a person who is just very self-absorbed. They talk incessantly about themselves and they don't seem to show much interest in other people. And those types of people, yes, they can be annoying and they can be, I would say they're draining as well in their own way, but they're not really malevolent individuals. They're simply people who are a bit clueless. And who knows, maybe they're on the autism spectrum and they don't really understand how other people are viewing them, and they're just very interested in their pet topic and they just can't stop talking about it. So there might be something else going on that makes them rather innocent in all of that. So I don't want to just, because I think a lot of people think of a narcissist as that type of person. We're talking about the people who are who are deliberate in their cruelty. Okay, that is a malignant narcissist. Why are these people cruel? If you are an empath, they could be jealous of your light or envious of your light, okay? And because they know that they are empty shells inside. There's something about them. I feel that these malignant narcissists, in my experience, they can be highly psychic. Believe me, they can like leave your life for a while, and right when you are starting to feel stronger, like maybe they really like turned you upside down and you had to recover from them and you got stronger and your life starts working again, that's when they swoop in. Or the opposite, they can come in when you are at your lowest point after they've left, after they've turned your life upside down. And, part of that is you allowing them to do that. So I don't want to make it like the victim of a narcissist is completely helpless. I mean, we buy into it too. So it goes both ways. So the bottom line is that even though they have this part of themselves that is so unaware of their own shadow, they're like really out of touch with it, I still think they are highly intuitive and they can sense when another person is in a weakened state, or maybe the opposite, when they're finally getting over the narc and then they come back into the picture. So anyway, that's one reason, because they're jealous of your light, or because they are they need to feed off of negative energy, so they have to generate it. Okay, so there are different ways that they can do this. Like, for instance, oh, and I didn't even put this down, but like triangulation. So I'll just talk about that right now. Because again, the air signs, let's talk very briefly about the air element. The air element is about communication. So Gemini, Libra, Aquarius specialize in intellectual concerns, and communication is a big part of this. The mind, but also how we receive and give out information. And so that's what communication is. And so in terms of triangulation, that is when a person will be, it doesn't have to be like two other people, although triangle implies three. But it could, to me, it can be like endless people, but it usually be like a group of people. And this one individual, the narc, the malignant narc, is going to go around and say something bad about someone else to one of the members of the group. And so basically the whole idea is to get everybody against each other, so that the narcissist is the only one who is smelling like a rose, who everyone is not fighting with, but they're fighting with each other. So you will see this in a narcissistic family, where the narcissistic parent will, sometimes I think even like playing favorites can cause this too. But it's really, that's not really triangulation. Triangulation is like kind of like a covertly poisoning the well about one person to another through, I mean, sometimes it can be through things that are actually true. It's not like they're always lying about these things, but they're trying to, turn people against each other. And it's interesting because I was just watching a video yesterday where a woman was talking about how she had to leave this group of friends because this person was doing that. And her assumption was she didn't understand why this person was talking badly about different people to the different members. And she thought that that person was just bored. And I wrote to her and I said, no, it's because it's actually a malicious thing. It's not anything that is just random or just because they're trying to pass the time. There is a deliberate reason why they do these things. And it's hard to wrap your brain around it if you're not that type of Machiavellian individual. Like you might say to yourself, why would anybody waste their time trying to do bad things? Well, because that's how they feel important. So the late Wayne Dyer would call such a person a petty tyrant, and that's what narcissists are. They're people who feel empowered by being parents, which is a temporary gig, which, you know, in other words, you are temporarily in power. And even when you're not even the whole childhood, when a child gets to be a teenager, they're even more independent, or they should be by that time. So the power of the parent diminishes even before they turn 18. And this is why some narcissists try to keep their children helpless, because they want to maintain that power over them. But bosses can be narcissists, and that's being a petty tyrant as well. And that's due to, of course, we could say that's due to insecurity, like not feeling important enough. But really, to me, at the heart of the matter is the fact that the person feels powerless. They say that narcissism is born out of trauma, and I believe that to be the case. Some of the trauma will be through the form of, you know, abuse that is what we would call malicious abuse, where the adult, the caretaker, other adult, is intending to cause harm. But sometimes it can be trauma that is coming from a major life event, like a parent dying, for instance. Something that the child, well, in general, children have very little control, very little power over their lives. So when they get abused, it's very easy to feel like they're in a helpless state. And so when they get old enough, they will, you know, behave either identifying as a victim based on being a childhood victim, identifying with the perpetrator and imitating that abusive behavior and doing it to someone else, someone they perceive as helpless, or, and this is the best scenario, neither, that they learn from the mistakes of the perpetrator and they refuse to be a victim. So the air signs, their weapon is words. And so what you're going to see with a lot of the things I mentioned is that communication is used. Playing mind games is used. So I have some that I have typed out here that I'm going to touch upon. The first one is twisting words. And twisting words is when someone says something and a person kind of rephrases it in a way that is kind of threatening to them, and when they can feel like the victim, but the person didn't intend for it to be that way. Now, sometimes in life, a person will twist our words, and it has nothing to do necessarily with them being a malignant narcissist or even a covert narcissist. I think that a lot of times in that case, maybe they are a covert narcissist where they always feel like a victim. But even if they're not playing the victim 24/7, a person sometimes has a distorted view on life. And so that can even extend to what they hear. And I think a lot of us have probably encountered this where we said something that was relatively innocent and someone misunderstood and they became offended by it because of their own low self-esteem or what have you, that it distorted what they heard. This isn't like that. This is deliberately choosing to mischaracterize what somebody said so that you can gain points on it. It's really quite dishonest. And yeah, I didn't mention that. Lying. I'll just mention that so I don't forget. Lying is a form of warfare, psychological warfare. And actually, I put down gaslighting, and I think that these two things they go hand in hand, because gaslighting, there might be different definitions of gaslighting, but to me, gaslighting is when a person tries to kind of ridicule you for believing certain things about them, and they say to you, "You're crazy. Like, why would you think something like that?" And they make you second guess yourself. If you are a decent person, sometimes a narcissist will run into another narcissist, but and then they won't be able to get away with something like that. But I think a lot of times, and this is what I have read, is that narcissists pick empaths because empaths tolerate their nonsense, tolerate people's nonsense more than other groups. A fellow narcissist is too self-absorbed to care about someone's mind games. They're not. They're trying to. They might try to do it on the narc themselves. So they're cut from the same cloth. So it's not going to work. But if you're trying to discuss with someone their negative behavior and they are not only lying about it, but they make you feel crazy for even thinking it, obviously that's to kind of throw you off the scent, but it's also because they want to mess with your mind. They want you to be like in this state where you can't tell what's real and what's false. And if you're a decent person, you may even feel bad for accusing them in the first place. And that's their whole MO, is to get you to really feel like you're not necessarily coming from a good place yourself and that you're doing something against them, when in fact you might be doing it simply because you really are upset about something, concerned about something, and you want to be communicating in relationships. Obviously, a healthy relationship requires open communication at all times. So that can be crazy making, and that alone can cause people to really feel this sense of, as time goes on, you could even begin to really lose touch with reality from the perspective of what is truly going on in your relationship with that person. It's almost like brainwashing. And I could even add that, where somebody does something over and over again or says something over and over again, and you start to believe it. I put word spells, and the reason I wrote it like that is that anytime somebody uses insults, put downs to another person, of course, we would call that verbal abuse or emotional abuse. And what it does with somebody who is already vulnerable is it re-triggers them, because chances are, this has been like, if this is a parent-child relationship. And I have to remember, too, that I'm talking about parent-child relationships, because I was kind of like, when I was talking about gaslighting, it was almost like I was talking about two adults with one another, and I was forgetting that we're talking about this specific dynamic. And I want to just backtrack to twisting words and gaslighting when a parent does it to a child. Sometimes this comes about when, let's say, a parent is an alcoholic and a child being very open, and they like say, "Why are you drinking, Daddy?" And the parent could say, "I'm not drinking. What are you talking about? This isn't alcohol." The child knows how the parent changes when they drink. And the parent lies and says, "This is, soda pop. This is 7-Up. This isn't vodka." Whatever. And the child is like, but they can tell that the parent is acting strangely and all of that. So there's that cognitive dissonance that develops. Okay. And that's what, when I say gaslighting, that's how it would kind of come across from parent to child, where the child observes something or says something to the parent based on what they see as going on with the parent, and the parent denies it, and they, try to make the child feel like they're crazy for even thinking that. The word spells is like, this constant emotional abuse that chips away at somebody's self-esteem. So when you receive this as a child, I mean, it's no wonder by the time the child is 18, they could be engaged in dysfunctional behavior because of this. Like, substance abuse is a big one. And so when you see people on the street who are junkies, be very compassionate, because chances are they came from a background of abuse. And it's one thing to have somebody be mean to you one time, a one-off. But imagine being trapped under the same roof with a parent over and over again, day after day after day. And it's a psychological abuse to be put down. And it's not just name calling. It can be in the form of the tone of voice. If the parent has a very derisive tone, the child knows that there's scorn in that voice, or just hostility. So the point is that the word spells, it kind of holds power. It's like a mantra that, like this magic incantation. You say it enough. And I didn't make this up. They have this saying, a new age saying, that why do you think they call it spelling? Because you're casting spells when you talk. And they were talking about, like, with the law of attraction, that you have to be very careful about what you say, because it can be a spell. And certainly we can see that people can very mindlessly say some very negative things. But in this case, we're talking about someone who is like, they know exactly what they're doing. They know that they are destroying the child's self-esteem. And they know that that can help them gain power, because that child isn't going to feel empowered. They're going to feel disempowered. And I wrote playing analyst, and what this means is, again, especially those narcs who seem to, have a lot of psychological insight that they're able to manipulate other people with. Maybe they have um, a real like handle on other people's, what makes people tick. So psychological analysis, and then they tell the person like their findings or their feelings about it. So even with parent and child, a parent can analyze a child's behavior, and if they are perceptive enough, the child will be like, oh wow, this must be true, because they really did nail it in terms of like what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. And yet it's not coming from compassion. So they're doing it to act like they have some kind of superior knowledge of who you are. And it's also, one of the things about the air signs is that they're coming from an abstract place. And this is, I put here cold shoulder, because this is kind of like an extension of that, where they're kind of living in the mind. And I joke about air signs that they love therapy because they can talk about their feelings. So in other words, I'm showing that detachment from actually feeling feelings. And that can lend itself to really maybe being damn good at being able to identify feelings and, be able to see where they originate from, but there's no heart that's connected to it. This can be pretty dangerous because a child already sees their parent as a god, as all-knowing, all-seeing. And when they seem to have a handle on, what makes them tick, that just solidifies it. And it's almost like the child can give away their own sense of who they am and what they're all about to somebody kind of imposing that on them, who is able to tap into some of their, inner motivations. So, yeah, and the cold shoulder too can apply to kind of really tuning out, like withdrawing from the child. The person, I'm not going to say this 100% of the time, that if someone's an air sign that they're automatically a cold fish, that they don't like to have physical contact, for instance. But it probably is true more times than not, unless other influences kind of dominate and would modify that. And so, but I'm talking about like on the emotional level, where it's like the parent may, not give that child the same amount of attention. They might speak to them in a very aloof manner to kind of like punish them for whatever they think the child has done. And like, we're not talking here about actual things that children have done that are, misbehaving. But even if we talk about misbehaving, it doesn't mean that a parent has to shame a child, beat a child, berate a child. There are other ways of, I don't even like the word discipline. There are other ways, or even correcting a child, of guiding a child. There are other ways of guiding a child that don't involve doing those kinds of things. And also are not lax parenting, where you're just letting the child do whatever they want. That's actual neglect as far as I'm concerned. There is this type of parenting that I don't know if it's like, it seems like it's recent, called gentle parenting. And as I was communicating with people on the internet, somebody was very disparaging about gentle parenting. And they kind of conflate it with lax parenting. And I'm not in favor of that either. I'm not a parent, but I just think that very interested in child psychology, and I think that I feel that even if a child misbehaves, if a parent is like aloof and gives them the cold shoulder, that tells the child that love is something that is conditional, that they will not be accepted by their parent unless they do certain things. And that can be, I think that can be quite damaging, to have a parent who withdraws. But it could just be, has nothing to do with anything wrong that the child did, but simply that that the parent wants to control because they are a narcissist, or they want to feed off of the negative energy that is produced when they reject their child in some way. And that also applies to the being, a verbal abuse. And it's really ugly. Let's face it. Narcissistic abuse is terrible. So I just wanted to say a few words about that. Maybe I should do a series too on people who are the victims of narcissistic abuse and how it affects them and what they can do about it potentially. All right. Thank you for listening. I hope that you receive something from this. If you'd like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.